Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of the SelectStart podcast. I'm your host, Brian. Joining me is my co-host, Chris, and today we're going to be talking about what has us purchasing video games, what influences us to actually click that buy button, or I guess if you're not into digital downloads, going into a store and purchasing a game. So that's going to be our main topic for today. I find it very interesting, and I think we've got a lot of different opinions, as well as I'm interested in any of the community's opinions on what influences them to buy a game. So with that, let's go ahead and select start.
Hey guys, it's Chris here. Glad to be here this week. Honestly, before we get on to the big topic of today, which I'm super excited about, I was kind of wondering with the changes in the fall lineup, if you're playing anything different this week.
Well, yeah, obviously, I guess as we're talking about kind of what are we playing, what's going on, and like I said last week, the updates I was talking about rumored updates for Destiny getting custom PvP matches. Well, that was confirmed, and so I know Mark and we've been diving headfirst back into Destiny. We've really taken, since we cleared, when I say cleared, the Taken King content, which was kind of the main story and some stuff. We've both really been on a hiatus for that game, having poured hundreds of hours into it, but we've driven, we've dove back in at a kind of full on this weekend, along with Overwatch. So it's been a very kind of class-based shooter heavy week for us, and so that's what I'm playing. How about you, Chris?
Well, this week my wife was out of town visiting some family out of state, so I had a very long weekend to just binge play. So I know you and I and some guys went and saw Suicide Squad and everything, and that was a blast. But
that was actually really good. I don't understand the hate behind it. Was it a perfect movie? No, but it was
incredibly entertaining.
As all get out.
It was incredibly entertaining. So I've been doing that, but I dove really hard into getting some quality time on the Titanfall 2 open beta.
Now, we were able to actually play one round of Titanfall 2 together. Obviously, guys, for anybody, it says pre-alpha. We say beta, but it's like pre-alpha technical. Can the servers even run tests? So there were some connection issues that we experienced, but we did get to play one game together, and it was incredible. I did not actually get to spend that much time with Titanfall 2. That's why I didn't even mention it, just because I only maybe played one or two games or matches. I think we played one, and then we went to play another, and you were talking on the party chat saying we were losing, and I was like, I'm real confused, Chris, because we're totally dominating this match, and it turned out we thought we were together, but we ended up being moved into two separate games completely, and that was kind of a bummer. But sorry, I kind of cut you off on that one.
Yeah, I've been enjoying playing that. I have been watching a lot of Twitch, and even when I was burned out on playing because I can't marathon like I used to, I still just turned right back around and threw on Twitch and YouTube. And I think at one point I had Twitch on my TV and YouTube on my phone. I was just enjoying as much content as I could shove in my face out in the living room, eating junk food and just living it up. If left to my own devices, I would never have clean laundry. My wife is the reason I get ashamed about dirty laundry being on the floor, and I do something.
I think essentially that some studies show that being married does tend to prolong male lives because you eat better, you take better care of yourself. You might.
The joke is that it does make it feel like it.
It's too funny. It's a marriage joke right there. No, but one of the things we also played, and just kind of a brief. So before we went over the movie, Chris and I are hanging out, and we went old school with some Rainbow Six Vegas 2, just for a little while before we just got too frustrated, both with the control scheme, but namely, because like we pumped up the difficulty to realistic, couldn't get through one of those terrorist hunt modes, and then we lowered it down, and we were able to finally clear it, but barely. Like it was pretty intense. It was not. We were not Rainbow Six SEAL quality terrorist hunters in that game.
I don't know that a larger team of us would have made it better. Like we was just throwing two clumsy people at the problem.
Well, it's fascinating because, like, you look at it, it's on the 360. It doesn't seem. I mean, when you think about it, like the Xbox One, PS4, they're coming up on like 4 years. Like we're talking about, we've been in a significant amount of time in the current generation. Maybe like next year, 4 years or something official. But it wasn't all that long ago that this game, was the new thing. And the controls, they seem to have. They were so different. That was one of the things that took the longest time to get into, was just the control scheme, because we've gotten so used to, I guess, what is now considered the modern shooter. Tactical as Rainbow Six is, it was more like, oh, I need to press down on the right stick to zoom in. I'm not used to that. It's so funny that used to be what the norm was, especially on Halo and all those other games.
Yeah, I tried to melee a guy. I threw a grenade at both of our feet. It was just a nightmare. It was very clumsy, but we got there and we did get it done eventually.
So, like, we kind of digressed and stuff, but like, what did you think of Titanfall 2? It is like, and we've said on the show and in the past episodes, it is kind of our big fall game for the game night crew to be migrating over to in October. So, I mean, obviously, like alpha side, like that being said, what are your impressions? So, like, what did you take away?
So this kind of transitions into what I'm looking forward to this fall, and Titanfall is definitely still on the list. They only had 3 game types as the weekend wrapped up. They had your Pilot Hunter, which is just your standard deathmatch. Wasn't anything new. It was definitely just Titanfall 1, the same. The UI is a lot different in the upgrade screen and stuff, and it's definitely been rehashed. I like it a lot. It definitely looks like it got a facelift. Not that there was anything wrong with the old system. Mm-hmm. Then there's the second type that was really new to me that I was playing was Bounty Hunter, and basically it's kind of the PvE mode from before, but now there's another team on there, so it's a lot like a Halo Warzone or something like that, and you rack up money as you clear a phase of AI, and then if you shoot another player, you get half that player's money. And at the end of the phase, there's 2 banks on the map, and you basically run there to deposit your money before you get shot. And so that was really interesting. It was a nice change of pace. I did miss it just being the standard Titanfall mode, just kind of the whatever that was called, where it's
the attrition
just,
or
yes, yeah. I missed.
And I think obviously from just a technical test that they know that how that mode's supposed to work. So we don't need to necessarily have people test that out too much. Maybe. I mean,
yeah.
I went onto the forums because, like, so I talked just a minute ago about how we were in one game together and then we were not in any other games after that together. And we were saying, like, the simple fire team or party type system, they have this new system called Networks, which is really a cool concept. It actually makes it a lot easier. It's kind of this, in-game clan that we can have everybody a part of. It wasn't necessarily super clear how to both invite people in or to restrict that or manage that, but obviously this is pre-alpha. But the lack of a clear of like who's all in this, and I'm just going to use fire team because Destiny, Halo, like a lot, it's a common concept in shooters now. The fire team, wasn't really clear about that, and so with that, I thought, like, other than that was I thought the UI, like you said, I like the changes that they've made. I'm very interested to see it, but I think that obviously that attrition and some of the, I guess, the other modes. They've kind of limited. I think that with next week, though, they're going to be introducing either more maps or more modes or something like that, because they had 3 modes, 2 maps this week. Next weekend or this coming, so by the time you're listening to the podcast, here in a couple of days, they'll have another technical test. And I don't know. I think they were talking about introducing more modes.
And it'll be interesting to see what they do with boosts. It's a lot like a Call of Duty kill streak system, where basically you kill a lot of people, you unlock a boost. The only 2 boosts that were available this time around that I had a chance to mess with was the amped weapons, which does exactly what it sounds like, and then these kind of tick mines that you throw down, and they kind of just run around like stupid robots, and they try to target a Titan.
I saw a lot of people using those.
Unfortunately, if you throw that down and you're trying to like camp a hard point, because that's the third game type that was out there, and you're sitting on a hard point capping it, and you throw your tick mine down and somebody comes around the corner and shoots it, it will explode and it will kill you too. So that's a little bit of a learning curve there. Some of the things felt clunky, like the new party system. You can definitely tell they're still working through some kinks. It'll be interesting to see how they're able to push through all that by October. But a lot of it felt really well refined. The maps felt good, the guns felt good.
The maps felt great. Like, they really felt like just well designed. Some of the best maps I've felt like I've played in a while. Where it's like, we were talking like in party chat during our playtime, and it was really fascinating because Halo, it's smaller teams, more condensed, closer areas to kind of encourage that fight. But with Titanfall, you have these big Titan mechs that you can be in, but then you also have these pilots who can run around and run through buildings and under things. And so the levels felt just like both massive and also very, very tight and well thought out and thought through. That was actually one of the great strengths of the original Titanfall, and one of the reasons why we played it so much and played it so often, and why I think, obviously off of that playtime for the original is what's driving us to play the sequel. It's I think that's kind of obvious to state, which is really exciting to see them go multi-platform to be able to open it up to more. And I'm interested in checking out the single player campaign to get more of the, I guess, hopefully the lore and a feel for the larger conflict outside of just deathmatch. Go ahead. You look like you got a...
No, speaking of single player, have you seen any of the clips from the early release of Deus Ex? Any of the Let's Play videos? No,
I have not. I know a lot of people are stoked. I got several friends who are like, they can't wait for them. Well, I guess we're recording this Monday night, so sometime tonight they'll probably be staying up pretty late to play when it unlocks.
I'm kind of excited.
You itching to get it?
Yeah, and you're my Square Enix fanboy buddy. You're my if you got a tattoo, it would be the Square Enix logo right across your chest. It'd
be a total black mage. It'd be an 8-bit black mage. It would be my tattoo.
So I was shocked that I heard. I got super excited about it before you, but I kind of want it now. And I feel like, here we are after like 3 weeks. Like, I feel like the last 6 months, I've been so consistent. Over the last year, I've only really bought Halo. I've picked up a couple of free games. I've picked up a couple of old games that have had new life breathed into them. I've really been pretty loyal to a very small number of titles. And then since we started recording this podcast, every week I feel like a schizophrenic. I'm like, ooh, shiny. Ooh, I want to go play this other new title now that I just heard of, because I think this podcast is really pushing me to go out and do the research. And so I'm exposed to all these articles where I'm suddenly aware of how many toys I don't own. That's something I'm looking forward to.
And that kind of leads us into kind of our main topic. It's that, so you've been exposed now through the podcast of this world of these games and these, like you said, these toys that unless you were looking, you might not find. So I think, with that, I think it's high time we've kind of teased the main topic enough. What are your thoughts? Shall we jump in, or is there any other thoughts you wanted to wrap up with on kind of things you're excited about?
No, I think that's great. The idea behind the topic this week is basically the role of the modern game review and the role of the modern, how do you go about selecting where your money and more importantly, your time in an era where there's a lot of free to play and microtransaction type games available. How do you allocate your time, especially if it's limited? That's something
with the job, with a family,
yes.
I mean, even if you don't have like all these different things competing, there's a lot of games out there and great games. We're, somebody was like saying like the Xbox 360 and the PS, 3 era was this golden age for games. It's like, I kind of feel like there's a golden age in every console generation, right? That it's like, there's like, when you look back at a generation, you're like, wow, these titles were like pivotal. They were critical, and they stand out above all other titles. But like recently, I feel you. And so like how do and this is also a question out to anybody listening to the show. Like, what influences you? What are your factors? I've got some ideas on my factors, and there was also a Forbes article. We'll put a link on the YouTube and I guess in any descriptions that you guys can go check out. And he's talking, the author's talking about video game reviews and how movie reviewers have it easy. Because a game is something like you should take time like you would take for a very long book. Like he brings up a lot of good points, but his main point is really to do a game review, you should do it like a really long book that you read a couple of times before you write kind of review, because of how games are structured, as opposed to the current structure that they use, which is movies. And the only caveat to his point that I would throw out is that's all well and good, but people patch games now. There's day one patches to games. There's games that receive content updates every month. Halo, every month. Is Halo the same Halo that it came out at the end of October as it is today?
Not even close.
They've added so much content. What if you Google a review, you're going to get here's how it was day one. And I get how that model made sense with an age before games could get updated. And we can also talk about the legitimacy of day one patches too, because Final Fantasy 15 was officially delayed because they didn't want to do a day one patch. Blah, 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 blah. Another topic probably for another podcast. But on that note, though, it's like, wait, like how are reviews influencing you? I'm going to throw it to Chris because I've got a lot of actually really big thoughts on this, and I don't know if they're really even going to tie to what you're thinking, Chris. But why don't you go ahead? You brought this to me.
I think the first thing you have to look at is how did we do it before? You know, when I was running on allowance money as a kid, I mowed a yard, I babysat a kid up the street. Like I came across this couple dollars, and I'm ready to go to Blockbuster and rent something for the weekend because that's what I could afford. How do you pick it? Well, IGN was the be all end all. You know, you had Game Informer, you had these titans of just this is what the score is rated. But the problem with a score is a couple of things. First of all, if you rate a game a 5 and then the next game comes out and it's better, by the very nature of it, you can't give it a 5, so it's got to get a 5.5. So scores over time creep. They just creep on up. And now, honestly, they don't even use anything below a 7. I mean, if you forget to even make a game, they're going to give you a 5. It's just terrible that how much these things have pushed their way up. And you have a few places that are like Ars Technica that does like almost like a pass-fail system, like buy, rent, skip.
Yeah.
And that's interesting.
I think that's actually a legitimate way of kind of going about it, because like I remember I ended up getting into review score snobbery. Like I remember there was a period of time where like I had enough expendable income, but I would only buy a game if it was a 9 or higher off of some certain reviewers that I followed. I've actually followed reviewers who I felt like had a similar taste, because that's the thing a lot of people, will get upset about. They're like, oh, this game that I was really excited about only got an 8, and that's ridiculous. It's like, well, that's because maybe that didn't necessarily speak to that reviewer, but you might seriously rate it as a 9. And with Metacritic, you can actually, you can go record your score. But the problem, even with a 1 to 5 or a 1 to 10 scale, most reviews end up being either a 1 or a 0 or a 10. It's like they're like user reviews and things like that are so like one or the other. I hate this. This is great. You do get people who buck that trend and will fall somewhere in the middle. But I definitely felt in my early, about 7 years ago, into this kind of review snobbery where I actually avoided games that would probably particularly stick to me, but because a reviewer said it wasn't a 9, then I was like, it's not worth my time. I'm going to skip it. And since getting out of that, I've actually had a much more enjoyable experience with games when I've kind of broken free of the review, so to say. In fact, I think, and we've seen this probably as a trend in media, that more people are going to YouTube and to various gaming, personalities like Twitch to get a feel for the game as people stream it, to then determine if they want to go participate in it. And so I would say that for me, outside of numbers and scores, etc., what influences me to buy a game is my friends? Like, what influences me to get a system? Well, do my friends have that system? And if so, what games are we gonna try to play together? And so, like, if like for example, like if you pick up human Deus Ex, and you're like, Brian, this is great. Chances are I'm probably going to go out and get the game too, and then we can discuss that game, right? But if you don't, that might be something that I actually particularly skip. Now, the reviews have been coming in extremely favorable for the game, which in this case, like for this particular situation, would help push me in that direction to say, that sounds interesting. I might do the same thing. Oh, you do it, and then I execute on it, as opposed to, it was a 5. Chris got it, and then I would wait for your feedback on, wow, Brian, that people, it's got bugs, or there's issues, but it's totally worth playing through because of the story, or because it's really ridiculous how overpowered this one augment is, and so you can just blow it up. But generally, just so people don't think I'm saying Deus Ex is a 5, I think I've seen 8.5 to into the 9s that people were rating the game very favorably, and the series as a whole, like speaking on that one, has stood the test of time. Like, it is generally a series that is very well rated, especially for when the games come out. So what else are you thinking on game scores, and what influences you?
Well, the question is, how do you pick what a game's job is? Because, when we're looking for the next game night game, mm-hmm. I go through and I read reviews actively. I don't actually care about the score at the top, because the score could be like, the soundtrack's amazing. Great. That does nothing for our game night. Or the storyline's amazing. Great. Does nothing for the game night. Mm-hmm. The graphics are incredible. Does nothing for game night. All I care about is it fun for multiplayer? And they'll be like, oh, the replayability sucks. It's only good for 40 hours or 20 hours. Or mm-hmm. game night's 2 hours a week. That's still 10 weeks. Yeah, like that's a very valid concept for game night game. But I'm going to pick Deus Ex for playing myself, which is a totally different set of priorities, even with me being the same player.
So there's obviously two competing factors that you just mentioned. So that there's like the games that you want to play with friends, and then there's like, it's kind of like the game, like the movies you want to see with friends, and then like, oh, this is just a movie that, when the wife's out of town, I'm just home, I'm gonna watch this because there's no way she likes this like action type movie, or like, so Julie does not like, Julie doesn't particularly care for like action movies, so it's like there was one that oh gosh I can't, it was incredible. Anyway, if it comes to my attention, I'll mention it on the podcast, but it was a great movie. I was happy to watch it, but she had no interest in it, so I watched it one weekend when she was out of town. So essentially you've kind of like done that. You've categorized two types of kind of games, kind of either your single player or games that you don't necessarily care to play with others, and then the multiplayer game. And there's the other factor, and you've mentioned this like a game night, is that there's a cost factor that comes into it. Like, what does the game cost, and how much value do you get on the return? And you usually try to say, like, you try to get $1 per hour right for the cost of the game. So it's like, if you're going to pick up this game, you expect 60, like if you pay $60, you expect 60 hours worth of playtime. And that's important. I remember you saying, like, okay, we were talking about moving game night back in the past to Destiny, which unfortunately didn't take off too well, and I'm going to do kind of my own little Destiny video this week, talking about some of the things that I'm excited about with the game. But namely, we were like, okay, you were like, before we move off of Titanfall, like, this is the requirement. I paid $40 for the game. I want to make sure we play 40 hours. We ended up doing 200 like hours in that game, but
yes.
But it was good, like, and I think actually I found that to be a valuable strategy, because it's like, hey, how much did I pay, and am I getting my money's worth? You got to
be more careful than just raw hours, because it's got to be hours of enjoyment. You can't just go buy a game that's grindy and be like, wow, thank God it took me 25 hours to pick up my first gun before I was allowed to play with other people in Halo. Like, that's not fun. So like No Man's Sky is getting a lot of criticism for that right now, because the developer came out and was really, really open the whole time. And he's like, we're talking about making this in there, and we're talking about making this in there. And as anybody who's been around the programming world knows, like, there are a lot of ideas at work that like we throw around, I'm not even in programming, and there are a lot of ideas we throw around that never come to be. And so we would never make them public, because that's not fair to the public, because the public is already going to embellish in their own imagination on everything that does come out of our mouths. So let's not say anything that's not concrete. and
that's
so,
a hard line to walk. As an engineer myself, I find that between sales and marketing, what they talk about, and I go, who said they said what, and it'd be done by when.
Yeah, and you want to be excited about your job.
And then I get mad calls from sales and from people like, hey, they said this was there, and I go, well, it can be, but what I told it's going to take 600 hours development time to do that, and it's like, we're happy to do it, but you call your boss, because he's also my boss, and he's the one who says to do this or not to do that, and I've been told we're not doing that, so I'm sorry there was some miscommunication. It's never with me, it's always that something is either misunderstood, but you're right. In the world of entertainment, it's like, oh, it's going to be this, and then you just start getting excited. It's the same thing that I'm fighting on right now, is that I'm so excited, and I'm really wanting to learn more about the Nintendo NX, but I can make the system never hit those expectations.
Right.
And so that's not fair to them.
That begs the question. Yeah. So obviously you're going to base a lot on your friends, but somebody has to be the first adopter, and it could end up being you on a particular game or console.
I'm an early adopter.
So okay. So if reviews can no longer be trusted on their face, and you're not necessarily patient enough to wait for somebody that's kind of done that book review thing that you said, like that Forbes article, that's an interesting idea, but I'm not going to wait until somebody's played Deus Ex 5 times to listen to their review. I'm not that patient.
And hype also plays a factor into buying these products when they come out. It's the excitement that's built up.
How do you choose?
For me, as an early adopter, like I look at it in a couple of different ways. So if we're talking about a system, like Nintendo or like Xbox and PlayStation, like what do I pick, right? So the earliest example was when the PS4 and the Xbox One were announced. Julie said, okay, well, obviously this year you can get one. You can't get both this Christmas, so I need to make a pick. And so for me, what that does is I look into a lot of factors. I read up about the various systems, finding out information about them that kind of help weigh and favor that. And then essentially at that point, you kind of almost take a risk. It's like, you're like, well, if I've got to make a choice, it's going to be X, Y, or Z. And so with the console, it's a little bit more concrete. You're spending more of an investment up. As far as a game goes, I've shifted my entire library to digital only. And so with that kind of approach, there are key titles that I know I'm going to enjoy based off the history of them, based off of the developer. So it ties so I pre-ordered Final Fantasy 15. I'm pre-ordering Gears 4, pre-ordering Titanfall 2. And a lot of that is based off of the track record of the developer and the genre and the game that I've come to know that I've enjoyed.
So you trust the developer?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And not the publisher. A lot of people get publishing games and development. They might not understand what that relationship looks like. And in fact, sometimes, and it's not always the fault of the publisher, but sometimes the reason why games are released and when they maybe needed 6 months in the cooker is usually because the publisher gets impatient and says, hey, we paid for this game. We want this out now. This is when, it was scheduled. So there's sometimes a tenuous relationship between the two, but
they've got a bit.
I trust the developer, so why did I even get into Titanfall? It's because I loved, it was Modern Warfare 2 was the last Modern Warfare that, Infinity Ward, who really made the Call of Duty series just shine out. And so there's a relationship with Activision. So I followed that history. I knew all of these things kind of going into it. And so the big people at Infinity Ward left, and they started Respawn Entertainment, which did Titanfall. So I was like, I really enjoyed Modern Warfare 2. I don't like what Activision did and how that relationship broke up. And so I haven't actually gone and played another Call of Duty since that point. I have completely just shifted and followed these developers. And so I think that's one of the things that it takes a little bit more research for people to do as opposed to anything else. But Rare, a lot of the guys who made GoldenEye and made Perfect Dark, well, they ended up going over to other studios. You follow the developers and you're going to find really quality titles. And the problem with that is that sometimes developers are behind a label and those things can shift. And so if you're patient and you can kind of follow the industry a little bit closely, you can kind of gather and pick out those pearls of who's designing this, who's leading this. it can bite you. Like, so I guess like an example of something that I did not buy in early and I did hold off, and I was glad I did, was Mighty Number 9. Big name, Inafune, who made the Mega Man series. Really what it was over the last couple of years, before Capcom decided not to really do anything with it for whatever reason. But I was just like, Kickstarter, I'm kind of hesitant on those kind of properties and on that kind of backing. It's a whole another topic for another day.
It's a scratch off. You might get a game at the end.
Mm-hmm. But with that, it's like, so I followed Square Enix, like you said. Like I follow these studios, I see what they're producing, and I read up on a little bit of the not too much. They had this big, at Gamescom this last week where they were showing off a lot of Final Fantasy 15. And I'm blacked out. I'm already in. Like, I don't want to know anything else about the game. I want to experience it for myself. I don't want to try to spoil anything. And so that's kind of where that's at. So that's there's many, like, and then if it comes down to a multiplayer game, I'm an early adopter. So usually what I like to do is I like to find things that I find interesting. Like I like what they do with Destiny. It's an RPG. It's a shooter. It's by Bungie, who made Halo. So they know how to make shooters, and they've stumbled, a bit through like year 1. Year 2 was way better. Like, it was just such a great RPG. And then year 3, I'm really excited about, because they're finally bringing in these things that were sorely lacking, and it's not fully complete. I think Destiny 2 will be hopefully a shining example of the lessons learned. But that was also something that I tried to influence other people to get in, and in some ways I was successful, and in others I wasn't so. Like, we talk about my brother on the show several times, and if he's not subscribed to the YouTube channel yet or listening to this podcast, we'll have to flog him or something. But but there's been approaches where I've tried to get him like in Final Fantasy 14, which I think is a big game he really enjoys, or Destiny. But there's just been sometimes where maybe I push a little too hard, or I don't let for the discoverability of the game to kind of shine through. And I've tried to kind of augment my approach as I address new titles that might be somewhat a blending of genres and things like that. But there's a risk there that I take, and I think any early adopter takes, and it's kind of the fee of being an early adopter. What are your thoughts on it? I talked a lot on that.
So I'm not really truly an early adopter anymore, because my time has become more dedicated to time with friends and things like that. So if I'm going to play a game on my own, it's probably not going to be too many more than 1 or 2 titles. I'm really trying to make an effort at creating some content for the podcast and stuff. And so I may be able to push my hours up and kind of make a priority out of it as the house gets further along. But I look a lot at YouTube and a lot at Twitch, mm-hmm. a lot. And you get to know a caster or a podcast or something that you trust. And then what happens is when that YouTube video or that Twitch stream or something comes to an end, and that content producer doesn't have something else for you in that vein, and you're still hungry for more, you go out and you search specifically for that subject. Mm-hmm. And if I notice that the same content creator keeps showing up over and over and over, and that's who I ended up watching this other game on, and that's who I ended up watching this other game on. That's how I add to my number of subscribed channels and my number of people that I trust. I keep that a pretty tight curated list, especially on Twitch, because I really don't want it to be a direct TV where I've got 600 channels. I want to press following, and I want, I've got 5 people on, and I know that no matter which one I click on, I'm about to enjoy my content. I'm a little more liberal with my YouTube, just because it's more of a Facebook thing. It kind of just feeds it into your genre.
Updates are over there on the left, so you can kind of watch those because it's not live, so you can kind of curate that whenever you want, and just kind of
and you're getting everything from everybody, mm-hmm. as opposed to Twitch. I could be subscribed to 80 channels and there might only be 5 live because I'm watching at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. So that I'm a little more careful with that. I want them to, and YouTube, you get a higher quality content out of a lot of producers because they have a chance to edit it. And so I prefer Twitch for specifically gameplay, because I don't want to see a best hits. I don't want to see your 5 crazy headshots in Halo and be like, oh, Halo looks really fun. It looks really easy to snipe. No, that's total crap. Like I want to get on Twitch and I want to be like, wow, this streamer who's normally very entertaining, who seems incredibly bored or frustrated right now. That's a very accurate representation of how I'm going to feel if I go spend my time dumping into this game. So that's kind of where I look.
That's a very good note. And I think one of the things that we've kind of lost over this transition to this generation is that while I have no problem with downloading a digital game, there's not really a way of saying like, oh, that game really wasn't what I was looking for. Can I get a refund? And there's been talks about game trading and sharing and even refunds and things like that with different systems. So hopefully we're going to see that system continue to evolve, because one of the things that's really lacking is let's say I pick up a game and I'm really enjoying it and you're on the fence, the ability for me to lend you that game or for you to go check out that game because I, on your friends list, have it, and they could say, hey, play the first hour, for free. Obviously that time limit and what they want to do should be up to the developer, but to open that up so that, it's like, well, let me check that out. Okay, let me create that character. Okay, I want to see more. I'm going to go ahead and invest in this game, because the thing we have lost is that the concept of the rental, really. Like, yes, you can go rent some games. They've got, GameFly and different services like that. But those are just things that, like, for me, from a time perspective, I'm actually not going to most likely rent a game. I'm going to research it. And if it's already out, I'm going to read about it. I'm going to check out YouTube. I'm going to check out Twitch to kind of make that decision if I want to buy or not. Yeah. I was very excited about Overwatch, but I ended up holding off for a while. And then after just continually being invited and seeing just so many people playing it, it's like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and bite the bullet. Thankfully, I had a little bit of my kind of allowance for the month. I was like, well, I've got the money. It's like, what am I going to spend it on? Well, let me go ahead and make that dive, and it's been a good choice. But it was one of those that it was interesting because I wasn't an early adopter on it, but I did kind of was excited about it beforehand. And again,
because of other people, I owned a GameCube controller. I owned a GameCube controller, and I didn't own a GameCube because at the time I had friends that owned a GameCube, and so what I got from those games was, and they didn't have an extra controller, so I could come play at their house with them as long as I brought my own controller. So I went to GameStop, I bought a refurbished controller, and I owned a controller to a system I didn't own.
Yeah, and so you played Smash Brothers with that, I would be my guess.
Yeah, and so I played Smash Brothers. There was some Tony Hawk back then. There was a lot of these. There were a lot of
downhill.
There were a lot of games. There were a lot of games that were very, very interesting back then. And so I didn't need to go buy the console. I didn't have the money for that, but I did have friends that played it. And so that's an important thing is when you look at what you're looking for. My brother only plays competitive games. That's all he looks for. And so he gets his games from basically professional streamers and friends. Who's a friend that's going to play competitive? And if it doesn't have a leaderboard and it doesn't have a esports presence, you're not going to get him. You're just not. I mean, I can try all day. I think it'd be fun to play a game like when we were kids, but he's just gotten his times come so hard to come by that only his top genre makes it onto his list 99% of the time.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's like, this is it can be considered a hobby. It can be considered a career. It can be considered a way of relaxing and enjoying it. And that's really what it's about. It's like, don't feel like you need to play everything, but if you can, then awesome, more power to you. But don't feel like you have to go and, be an independent game reviewer if you're not being paid for it. So anyway, with that, I wanted to wrap up the show. For those of you who are listening, especially on YouTube or on SoundCloud, please feel free to leave a comment of what influences you. Like, did any of our thoughts and points kind of ring true? And as always, I guess the standard social media role: subscribe, like the video or the rate us on YouTube or on iTunes or whatever. Just really let us know what you're thinking. We love to hear from you. You can always reach us at the email work2gamevideos@gmail.com. That's work2gamevideos@gmail.com. If you have a question that you want to send in without posting a comment. And with that, Chris, you got any final words?
No, just thank you guys. Share the podcast with friends.
Yeah. All right, everybody. And as always, until next week, see you then.